They say every love story begins with a choice, but mine didn't. It began with headlights slicing through the dark and a man stepping out of a black SUV, not asking for my name, just one thing. Are you safe? I wasn't. Not from the men circling me in the trees. Not from my own past. Not from the feeling that the ground beneath me had stopped being mine a long time ago. I wasn't running toward anything. I was running from it. And that night, I didn't fall in love. I fell into survival. Again. But what he offered wasn't romance. It was shelter. Warmth. A reason to stop running for a moment. He didn't know who I was. Not really. Just a woman with a torn sketchbook, a trembling dog, and silence where her name should have been. And yet, after 3 hours in his kitchen and 2 mugs of strong coffee, he asked me to pretend. Just for a weekend, he said. Be my fiancé. I laughed at first. Then I looked around, at the safety, at the stillness I hadn't felt in years, and I said yes. But neither of us was honest that night. He wasn't the only one hiding something. So was I. The house sat like a secret on a hill. Quiet, surrounded by woods. A single dirt road twisting up to it like a question that had no right answer. Inside, everything was too neat, too untouched, like it was waiting to be lived in again. Ethan, the man who'd pulled me from the trees, moved like someone used to silence. He didn't ask much, didn't pry, and that made it worse, because it gave me room to pretend I was whole. I stayed in the guest room, wrapped in flannel sheets. The dog curled against my legs like it knew I needed something real to hold on to. For a while, we didn't talk about the arrangement. We just existed. Parallel. I'd wake to the smell of burnt toast, find him muttering at the stove, wearing a shirt too clean for someone who didn't leave the house much. He'd ask if I liked the eggs. I'd say yes, even when I didn't. That's how intimacy begins. Not with kisses, with lies so small you forget you're telling them. The first time I saw her picture, it wasn't framed. It was folded, creased at the corners, tucked behind a book on his shelf like a thought he couldn't throw away. She was beautiful in the way glass is beautiful. Sharp, perfect, dangerous. I didn't ask. He didn't tell. But something shifted in the air the moment I saw it. Like the room itself remembered what had happened here, and was warning me not to forget it. The next night, he cooked dinner and said her name out loud. Elena. One word, and my skin crawled. She used to live here, he said, before things got complicated. I didn't respond. What do you say to a man who still says her name like a prayer that failed? Instead, I asked what she did. He said she didn't have a job. Said she liked to read. Liked to watch people. Liked control. Then he paused, eyes locked on mine. She didn't like dogs. I noticed the locks before I noticed the view. 3 on the front door, 2 on the back. The windows had been reinforced. Not recently. Like someone had once needed to keep the outside world out, or the inside world in. When I asked about it, he just said, it's habit. But habits are born from fear, and this house reeked of it. I started drawing again. Nothing specific. Just lines, shadows, outlines of faces I couldn't place. He'd watch sometimes, lingering at the edge of the room like he was afraid to step into whatever world I was sketching. And I didn't stop him, because it felt safer to be watched by someone who didn't ask questions. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was heavy, mutual. Like we both knew words might break whatever fragile thing we'd built. Some days, we said nothing at all. Others, he'd tell me things that sounded like confessions. about how he couldn't sleep unless he heard the wind through the trees, how he used to leave the porch light on for someone who never came back, how the guest room used to be a studio. I never asked whose. One morning, I found a letter on the kitchen table. No envelope, no name, just left there. I didn't open it, didn't need to, because I already knew whose handwriting it was. It matched the one I'd seen on the back of that photograph. Delicate, precise, like a woman who took her time destroying things. That same day, Ethan told me the dinner was happening. The one with my parents, he said, like we'd talked about it 100 times before. We'll do it this week. You'll wear that green dress again. I wanted to ask if it was hers, but I didn't, because I already knew the answer. It fit too well to be mine. The night came faster than I was ready for. His parents arrived in a silver car that looked too polished for the dirt road. We ate in silence for the first 10 minutes. Then the questions started. Where did I grow up? How long had I known Ethan? What did I do? I lied so easily it scared me. Not because I was good at it, but because part of me believed the version I was inventing. His mother watched me the way hunters watch deer. Still, focused, waiting. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. He's never brought anyone home before, she said. I suppose you must be special. My throat tightened, because I'd heard that tone before. It wasn't approval, it was a warning. Later, after the dishes were washed and the wine was gone, I caught her alone on the porch. She didn't look at me when she spoke. He loved her once. The other girl. I didn't answer. You remind him of her. Not in the way you look, in the way you vanish in a room. She paused. Be careful who you become here. This house. It remembers. When they left, Ethan didn't say a word. Just poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and stood by the window. The dog sat by the door like it was waiting for something to return. I stood in the hallway, holding that silence in my chest like it might shatter if I breathed too hard. That night, he handed me a velvet box. No explanation, just placed it on the table between us like a dare. Inside, a ring. Simple. Gold. No stones. I thought it might help the story, he said. You don't have to wear it. But I did. Because it fit. Because it was easier than asking where it came from. The night after the dinner, I couldn't sleep. Something about the quiet felt watched. Like the house had swallowed too much truth and was choking on it. Ethan had gone to bed early, but I stayed in the hallway, staring at the guest room door. I don't know what pulled me to it. Maybe it was the smell of turpentine, faint, almost gone, but still clinging to the walls. Maybe it was the feeling that someone had once stood there for too long, waiting for something that never arrived. I opened the door slowly. The room was too clean. Not empty, just erased. Like someone had tried to scrub the past out with bleach and silence. But you can't erase presence. You can't erase memory, especially not when it clings to the air like smoke. There was a desk by the window. Simple, worn. One drawer. Unlocked. Inside were the letters. Dozens of them. Folded and refolded until the creases looked like scars. Each one addressed to him. Each one signed the same way. Elena. I read 3, then 5, then all of them. My eyes burned from the handwriting, sharp, leaning forward, as if the words themselves were chasing me. Some letters were frantic. Others were eerily calm. But the one thing they all had in common, they bled control. One line kept echoing in my head. If she stays, I'll finish what I started. You know I will. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew how it felt. Like standing at the edge of a frozen lake and hearing the first crack. Beneath the stack of letters was a photograph. Old, bent at the corners. 2 boys, Ethan and another man, laughing on a dock, the water behind them still and endless. The same face, the same eyes, but only one had made it to this house. On the back, in faint pencil, cremated. August 7th. When I showed him the next morning, he didn't flinch, didn't yell, didn't even look at me at first. Just sat on the floor with the dog and whispered something I couldn't hear. Finally, he said, "She did that. She made sure no one would believe him. Said he was unstable. Said he hurt himself." He paused. He didn't. I asked who he meant. He didn't answer. Just stood and walked to the window, hands clenched. She took everything from him. From me. And now she's circling again. You were never supposed to meet her, but I think she saw you with me, and that scared her. He turned to me. Because you reminded her what it felt like to be loved without control. There was something broken in his voice, but it wasn't weakness. It was memory. And the way he said it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like regret. I should have left. Right then. Packed up the dog, the sketchbook, the ring, and vanished before the next sunrise. But I didn't. Because there's a kind of comfort in unraveling, especially when someone's unraveling beside you. We didn't make love. We didn't even touch. But that night, we sat on the porch with a blanket between us, watching the wind shift the trees like they were trying to whisper secrets we weren't meant to know. I remember his hand hovering near mine, not touching, just close enough to remind me I wasn't alone in the dark. The gate creaked just before dawn. Not a bang, not a knock. Just that hollow, aching groan of rust giving way. In the stillness of that hour, it might as well have been a scream. Ethan was on his feet in seconds, barefoot, silent, already moving. I followed him without thinking. The dog, restless, darted ahead like it knew something we didn't. Outside, the sky was bruised with that in-between shade of blue, where night hasn't fully left and day hasn't quite arrived. The wind had picked up, carrying with it something sharp, not cold, not just weather, something that felt like teeth. The gate was swinging, not wide, just enough to feel wrong. There was no car, no footsteps on the gravel, no sign of a visitor, just an invitation left open by something or someone that didn't want to be seen. "She's not trying to come in," Ethan said, voice low. "She's trying to pull us out." That kind of calm, controlled, cracked at the edges, is more terrifying than panic, because it means the fear is already inside. It's just waiting to be useful. We went back in. He bolted every door. He sat the dog by the front like a sentry. Then he made breakfast, like it was any other morning. Eggs, toast, coffee. I sat at the table, hands wrapped around the mug like it could anchor me to this version of reality, the one where I was someone's fiancé, not someone's target. But my skin didn't believe it, and neither did my gut. "I think it's time," he said. I blinked. Time for what? He met my eyes, calm but hollow. "For the dinner." "What dinner?" "The one where they meet my fiancé." His voice didn't waver, but something shifted in the air. It wasn't a request. It was a final move in a game I hadn't realized I'd been playing. That evening, I wore the same dress, the one I'd worn when I first arrived. Cleaned, pressed, familiar. He wore a suit. Dark gray, crisp. Together, we looked like something out of a photograph no one ever took. Two strangers in costume, dressed as a couple. His parents pulled up in a sleek silver car. They arrived on time, like people who've always been on time. His mother was tall, elegant, glass-like, the kind of woman who held her wine glass like it was a weapon she could use without raising her voice. His father shook my hand but didn't see me. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. polite in that way that feels more like surgery than hospitality. They asked all the right questions. I gave all the right answers. It was like auditioning for a role I never studied for. But somewhere in the middle of the meal, I stopped lying. I talked about the dog, about the way Ethan always left lights on in the hallway, about how the coffee was always too strong. His mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She leaned in slowly and said, "He's never brought anyone home before." Her voice was warm, but behind the compliment I heard the warning, "Don't break him. Don't become another ghost he has to bury." When they left, we didn't talk. He poured a drink and sat on the porch, staring at the trees like they owed him an answer. I joined him, not because I had something to say, but because the silence between us felt safer than anything outside the door. Then he handed me a small velvet box. My breath caught. Inside, a ring. Simple, elegant, real. "You don't have to wear it," he said, not looking at me, "but maybe it'll make things easier." I didn't ask who it belonged to, didn't need to. I just slid it on, and it fit. Too perfectly. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, because for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like the past had finally stopped chasing me, but it hadn't. It had just changed form. I waited until Ethan was asleep, the dog curled at his feet, breathing steady. The house so quiet it felt like a held breath. I walked to his office. It wasn't locked. That's the part that broke me. It wasn't locked. He knew I'd look. And still, he left it open. The drawer opened with a sigh. Inside, letters. Dozens of them. Some folded with care. Some torn at the corners like they'd been opened in anger. Every one of them signed with a name I didn't want to read. Alina. The handwriting was erratic. Not chaotic. Deliberate. Desperate. "If she stays, I'll finish what I started. You know I will." Some letters were dated just days ago. Some were from years back. But all of them were soaked in the same ink. Obsession. Beneath the stack was a photo. Ethan and another man. Same eyes. Same crooked smile. His brother. The one he never mentioned. They looked whole. Alive. Until I turned the photo over. A date. A place. A single word. Cremated. I didn't confront him that night. I just lay in the dark and listened to the silence between us. It was louder than anything she could scream. But in the morning, I couldn't pretend anymore. I placed the letters on the table, not to accuse, just to offer the truth a place to sit. He didn't panic, didn't explain, just stared at them like they were old friends come to settle a score. "I tried to protect him," he said, voice barely a whisper. She made him look unstable, dangerous. He wasn't. He was the only one who saw her clearly. His hands trembled. He told me she needed destruction to feel alive, that she played with people until they broke. And when she couldn't break him, she turned to me. Then he looked at me. Really looked. You reminded her of me, and that terrified her. I wanted to run, but I didn't. Because sometimes trauma doesn't want freedom. It wants a witness. The last night, we sat on the porch and watched the sky shift. No gate, no knocks, no headlights. Just silence. But it wasn't peace. It was surrender. When I stood to leave, he didn't kiss me, didn't ask me to stay. He just handed me my sketchbook. I hadn't touched it in days. A new page had been filled. It was me, smiling. A version of myself I didn't recognize, but wanted to. Beneath it, written in pencil, you reminded me what safety feels like. I still wear the ring, not because it binds me to him, but because it reminds me. that even broken people deserve to feel whole, if only once. If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me, then maybe you understand. Maybe you know what it's like to play house with ghosts, to survive love that was never supposed to be a fairy tale, to find truth in places too dark to name. These stories aren't fiction. They're confessions dressed as memory, and they're not over. They never are. So if you want to hear the ones no one dares to tell, subscribe to They Never Saw It Coming, because the most unforgettable truths are the ones that hide behind the people we think we understand.